Hello, welcome back. We're looking at Luke chapter 12, a chapter that talks about fear, worry, and anxiety, but a chapter that really goes deeper than simply those issues of fear, worry, and anxiety. A chapter that goes to the very heart of what life is all about, or what it should be about. And in a sense, it's not really aiming at fear, worry, and anxiety. It does hit that, it does deal with that, but it's more of a byproduct of listening to what Jesus says and reorienting our lives to what he says is important. And so that's the big picture. And we're going to look more at that big picture as we continue in these videos. But for this devotion, I want to talk about why we are so afraid. What are we afraid of? What makes us afraid? And I think that's changed in the world that we live in today. I think we have not less reasons, but maybe more reasons to be afraid in our world today. In other words, our way of looking at life in America in the 21st century is that we look at it in such a way that it almost breeds more fear, worry, and anxiety. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I want to tell you a story about my family, myself, something that happened to us about 10 years ago. I was in the ministry, and we had been through a very difficult time, and I took a call to another church, and as soon as I got there, things just began to unravel in my family and in myself, my own health, and basically I just crashed. I was exhausted. I was experiencing a lot of anxiety, problems sleeping, a lot of depression, and it was so bad that we ended up having to leave that church, resign, and I had to move across the country to another place to where I could recover from that. And I went back into construction, and it was a bad time to go into construction because the economy wasn't good. And we really struggled a lot. Now, we didn't struggle in the sense that we starved. We were actually never even close to starving. We were debt-free. We had some savings. We had people around us who were helping us, and we would have more help if we needed it. But I remember being just really anxious and really worried. Now, I had a family to support, and that certainly contributed to it. Just my emotional condition at the time and my mental condition was very bad, and so that certainly contributed to it. But I just remember asking myself, why am I so worried? I'm not afraid we're going to starve. It never even crossed my mind. We won't starve. And I realized that what I was worried about was that I was no longer even with everybody else. I was no longer, doing what everybody else was doing. I was no longer in the game, pursuing things that everybody else was pursuing. The financial struggles we were under kind of put us in a place where we were looking at other people and we were realizing how different we were than them. And it was more a worry of being ashamed. It was more a worry that we're not keeping up, a worry that my worth was being diminished because of where I was. Now, I think that's very important, and I want to just flesh that out for a moment. I think as I look back at my own life when I grew up, and I've talked about that before, and how we've gone as a country over the past maybe 30, 40 years, and even prior to that. I'm sure other people could talk about this even better than I could, but it seems to me what we've done is we're a nation that has experienced a tremendous amount of blessings, tremendous amount of material comforts and prosperity. And so we were at one point, we were saying to ourselves, I can have more. The sky's the limit. Follow your dreams, the American dream. Do what you want to do, and you can make it. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that necessarily, but it's this idea that I can be anything I want to be. There's so many opportunities. And then I think it went from there to I ought to have all of these things. That it's not something that I can just attain, I can aspire toward, but it's something that is, in a sense, owed to me. I ought to have it. I ought to have a nice house, and I ought to have a good pension, and I ought to have, a nice car and a family and all of these things. These are things that are somehow owed to me. It's almost like an entitlement mentality. I ought to have them. And then I think what we're seeing right now in this phase of our country's history, which makes fear and anxiety more and more of a problem, is not only can I have them, and I ought to have this, but I'm nothing if I don't have this. I'm worthless if I don't have these things. It becomes a part of our identity. And so when we think about what's going on right now economically, most of the time what we're fearing is not starving. We're fearing just going down a few notches. We're fearing not having everything that we think we ought to have. And the anxiety, I think, is generated to some degree by our sense of worth in these things. And so I say all that to say, what Jesus is going to say at the end of this section that we're looking at is very powerful. It's very helpful in dealing with that kind of mentality. And again, we're not aiming at fear and anxiety, alleviating that. We're aiming at our life. And as we aim at that, I truly believe that it will, as a byproduct, deal with some of our fear and anxiety. Thanks for watching.